다 되려야 나도 뭐 예 가자한테 캐는 뭐지 뭐가 캐는 뭐지 이제서 캐는 뭐지 디스tilation
Yesterday, I saw Bogarchen Rinpoche. So, Tashi Rinpoche. I saw all the Kempos and Geshes. The nuns from the Shedar, foremost among the Sangha, and as well as all of the Dharma friends who are watching over the webcast. First of all, I'd like to offer you my greetings. So today, actually, as I mentioned yesterday, I thought I should speak about Mikyö Dorje's birthplace and birth region. So I didn't really prepare well enough for them. So maybe I'll tell them about it. So actually, this year's teaching it's not certain that we'll ever have a chance to have such a long teaching as this in future years. So I think it's better to take the time and to try to say as much as I can rather than trying to push through and say that I have to say this, I have to teach this today and that today, tomorrow, and that tomorrow. And at first I thought I had to make a schedule for myself like that, but when we're actually doing this, it doesn't really work. And so I just try to say as much as I can. When these autobiographical praises, to teach the entire good deeds, the entire usage this, but to divide it up into, I'm going to say this, and I'm unable to make a schedule that I'm going to teach this, what order I'm going to teach everything in. And so please excuse me for this. So what I'd like to speak about today is, as I announced yesterday, I will speak about the second of the good deeds in the autobiographical praise, the good deeds. Sometimes it takes a while. The second of the good deeds is, in terms of the subject, is abandoning the impediment Dharma, negative friends. And the root text reads, without disdaining inauthentic gurus and companions or following them along the paths they taught, I did all I could to overcome the thoughts of the three poisons, impediments to reaching the Dharma's culmination. I think of this as one of my good deeds. The main point that this is teaching is that is the first of the good deeds that was taught. Mikyö Dorje talked about how he entered the teaching, of the Dharma and began to practice the Dharma. And so the second of these is that when we are practicing Dharma, there are many internal and external impediments and harmful conditions. And among them, is that if you follow negative friends, then many difficulties will happen. So how this is teaching how Mikyö Dorje overcame the impediments to practicing the Dharma, in particular the negative friends. And so that is the main topic of this verse. Oh, no, I need to hide that for a little bit. I'm not supposed to show that yet. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, the Karmapa Mikyö Dorje from the time he was born and from immediately after birth, he did so many amazing things that people could see, that people immediately felt great faith and respect for him as the reincarnation of the Karmapa. Also, Situ Tashi Paljor looked at the testament left by the previous Karmapa and to a great degree accepted that he was the Karmapa's and instructed people to respect him as the tulku. But one disappointing thing that happened at that point is that Situ Tashi Paljor passed away soon after the Karmapa was born. And so for that reason, Situ Rinpoche was not able to continue working towards the recognition of him as the tulku. And so after that, they went to Ryuchi, and the master of Ryuchi, Jigten Wangchuk, showed him great respect. And said that there's no mistake to recognize him to be as the reincarnation. And at that point in time, there was a Lhorong. It was called Lhorong, the community of the Lhorong Nangzong. So he's basically the leader of Lhorong. And he said that he's the reincarnation, so you need to take good care of him. And the Lhorong community accepted this and agreed. And they invited him to the Lhorong monastery and said that they would provide well for him in terms of food and clothing and so forth. But if we, in actuality, but there's an autobiography of Mikyö Dorje that he wrote while he was at the Namtu mountain. Those and saying that was they were just about to recognize him as the tulku as Churichyasa. Now the reason why these situations happened at base is that at that time, as Churichyasa had passed away, and because he had passed away, his regent was Gyaltsap Tashi Namgyal. Gyaltsap Tashi Namgyal was and so Churichyasa had said officially was not recognized as the regent of the seventh. And so the seventh Karmapa had passed away, and so the encampment, he was the highest lama, he had the highest rank, and that was Gyaltsap Rinpoche. So naturally, Gyaltsap Rinpoche had to act as the regent of the seventh Karmapa Churichyasa. And so for that reason, the people in the encampment didn't really listen to him. Not only didn't they listen to Gyaltsap Rinpoche, during the time of there was a very strict regime and strict rules for the encampment during the time of the seventh Churichyasa. And beer and meat were not even allowed to be brought inside the encampment. And if a woman had to come into the encampment, she could not spend more than a day. She could only be there during the daytime. And so all of these rules are just completely lost. In addition to that, Gyaltsap Rinpoche, they criticized Gyaltsap Rinpoche quite a lot. And in the end, there was someone from Karma monastery named Situ Tashi Paljor who passed away, and they said that Gyaltsap Rinpoche had given him poison, and so they made it difficult for Gyaltsap Rinpoche to stay, and so he, for a time, had to go to the area of Jang. Now, the seventh Karmapa Gyaltsap had many great students. There were many great students of the seventh Karmapa Gyaltsap, but the monks in the encampment wouldn't pay any respect to them. But for example, with Nyempa Rinpoche, Nyempa Rinpoche later became the most important for him. Later they said he was a bad person. He's a charlatan. There's a Dulmatashi Wezara. He also became a teacher of Mikyö Dorje, and they said he's a weak person. He has no power. They disregarded him. They didn't consider him to be anything. Then there was, they said that the Lord of Dharma, Kamatunapa, was very well versed in both Dharma and in politics, and they had a little bit of faith for him. But he didn't get any opportunity to come to the encampment and say that one should do this or that. They didn't give him any power. And so likewise, now also when they were appointing a teacher or tutor for Mikyö Dorje, someone who was worthy of being the tutor and who really should have been appointed appointed as tutor. That person was Shama Chura Chenga Chura. But the people in Parliament said that they said that he broke his samaya with the previous Karmapa. And so if his shadow even falls on you, you'll go to hell. And so even when Mikyö Dorje invited Chenga Chogitrapa, the people in the encampment wouldn't even allow the Shama and the Karmapa to meet. And so because now the reason why they thought so badly of Shama Rinpoche, but there are many reasons probably, but one main reason is that at that time, the Shama Rinpoche had gone to Patu and had become very powerfully, both dharmically and politically. And so the members in the encampment envied him, and that is probably why they did not like him. I think that is the main reason. And so when the Shama Rinpoche didn't allow him to have Shadvitsuru, and so the big people in the encampment, and they had a discussion. They thought about who would be the most important, who would be the best person to be the tutor for that would be Jung Tashi Paljor. So that's Jung Tashi. So they invited him to the. They were bringing him to the encampment when just before he arrived at the encampment, he vomited blood and died. And so what didn't work out as they wished. And all of the things that had been present, and so the wife of Tashi Tundrup and his students had taken all of the sacred objects from the seventh Karmapa, and they took control of them. So basically, the whole point is that So actually, so basically, all of the sacred objects, all the powers, so everything had been, so it had fallen to the power of this woman, and so instead of keeping the good Dharma rules, they didn't even wear their monastic robes in the encampment, and wherever the encampment went, there would be about they'd take about 20 tents of beggars along with them. Now, earlier the great encampment had the sangha of the early encampment had basically all really deteriorated, and all of the animals, the goats and sheep that had been offered them, were all killed, and they had either feasted on the meat. Now, Chuda Gyatso had passed away, and so they should have built some sort of a stupa for his relics, in particular for what happened for Chuda Gyatso. When his corpse, when his remains were cremated, there were they had in each of his it was a miracle that happened. The vertebrae, there was an image of Avalokiteshvara, and these should have been, and they later they were put in a stupa. Now later Mikyö Dorje said that they should be placed in a place where everyone could see them, but they were not. So all these sacred objects and sacred relics, and there was no one making offerings or taking care of them. And so it was really a very bad situation. Later, Gyaltsap Rinpoche returned from the region of Jang, and he built reliquaries for the remains of Chuda Gyatso. And he recognized Mikyö Dorje, the Eastern tulku, as the Karmapa. And it turned out well, but he suddenly fell ill and passed away. Not only did he pass away, they took his remains. No one took care of it. They didn't know how to take it, or they took it and they buried it in sand. And when they buried it in the sand, then within the sand later, there are many different. There are many ring cells like the size of mustard seeds. So when Gyaltsap Rinpoche suddenly died and passed away, people said that he passed away and died so suddenly because someone had given him poisonous. And so probably the reason why they hid his body in sand is because they thought that he had been poisoned. So they buried his. So I think that they must have buried his remains in the sand for that reasons. So when these really depressing situations, really revolting situations happen, are not written in many of the older and the new documents, but liberation stories. But later, Mikyö Dorje wrote a letter criticizing the encampment, or scolding them, and in that letter, it explains these events in great detail. But that letter is no longer available, extant. But the way we know that it's there is that during the time of the 13th Karmapa, a student of what's called Negowa Karma Shempen Gyatso wrote a liberation stories of six of the Kamsam gurus and students, and because of that, we know that these events occurred. Likewise, in the autobiography of the fifth Dalai Lama, it is mentioned in brief that such events happened. But in the past, when we only see the fifth Dalai Lama's thing, we think We think probably the Dalai Lama said just made this up because it, or just wrote that as a, could this have happened so badly? We wouldn't have really believed it. But later, when I saw the autobiography, or the lives and stories of the Karmapa and by Negoa, and saying, "Oh, what the great fifth said, is probably true," and I had certainty in that. Likewise, in the commentary on the good deeds by Sanjay Paljor, he describes many such events that were similar. And the reason I'm explaining these is that the commentary by on the good deeds, as I mentioned yesterday, or the other day, was published by the Vajravidya Vajravidya Library. Now, this edition was based on the, as I mentioned before, was for the manuscript that came from the Drepung Library. And when we were translating the good deeds into English and Chinese, and proofreading this, and while doing during that period, I found another manuscript for the good deeds. I think this is like a good coincidence, good interest. Prior to that, we hadn't noted that, but it's just happened. Sometimes they just arrive. And so I received another manuscript of the good deeds. And now, when we compare the two editions, that new one and the previous one that we already had, sometimes there are even a couple lines or a couple of pages that are just different. I think that if you put the two together, the ones that, if we have the printed text that we have, what is lacking there, if we could fill it in from what's in the new edition. In particular, the old manuscript that we found, what it's written in the end of that one. This commentary on the liberation story was written by Sanjay Paljor himself, and then he offered it to Mikyö Dorje to see it, and Mikyö Dorje Mikyö Dorje instructed him what to delete and what to add. And so for that reason, that liberation story that we have just found, in this manuscript that we have just found, is an important text and an important source for us. And what it says in that one is that when Mikyö Dorje was young, most of the attendants in his retinue would say that we're doing a Gana Chakra, and they'd always be eating like an entire sheep. And so in saying it was they made plan to this, and the Mikyö Dorje said that when this is calling eating the flesh and blood of these weak animals, and calling it Ganachaka has no benefit and is very dangerous, so it's better not to do it. And so he did not allow them to do it. And then one day, in the encampment, there's a brick of tea. This is like, so that's a tea they put a brick inside the 5 or 6 bricks of tea in a package of bamboo, and one of these was lost. When it was lost, someone said, they brought someone who had no agent, and it said, "Oh, he stood in." They put him, and they put them in the encampment's prison. And when not only did they put him in the encampment, the attendants, they asked him, so you need to say that he is as if you need to say that he is a thief, as if you say it with clairvoyant. And if you don't do that, then then people are going to we're going to punish you. They're going to beat him. It's like they threatened him. You need to say this. If you don't, we're gonna get you. You're going to be hard for you. But Mikyö Dorje, what he said was, Mikyö Dorje knew he was not the thief. So I don't know whether he's the thief, but if you can do what you do, it's fine. But I'm not going to lie. Later, they found it became very clear that that person was not the thief. And so he had many such negative friends, but he didn't come under their influence. And he always spoke true words and the truth. And later there were also, if the intendant said, if there's someone who had a good thing, they said, they think they try to find a way. They said to Mikyö Dorje, oh, you should find a way to get that thing from him. And they'd speak to him, and they asked him to do this often. But Mikyö Dorje said, if they give it out of their faith, that's fine. But if I were to be deceptive and give them, then that is taking without giving, and that's not okay, he said. So in brief, sometimes the people that say you need to butter up, the people who are going to offer them that you need to do many different things, do things to try to accumulate wealth. Many people said this, but he didn't come under the influence, and he stood on his own two feet, and he was not influenced. Also, people would say, this monastery and this region are harming our teachings. They're harming the Karmapa, so please wage war on them. Please do cast spells on them. Many people said this, asked him to do this many times. But he said, I don't even know how to do it. He had no intention to do that. He did not know how to do it in practice. And so, likewise, when he was doing the Mahakala practice and so forth, and people would say, we're offering this to Mikyö Dorje, and then they'd say, we're making an offering to Bernach, and they'd bring a lot of beer and meat, and they'd eat as much meat as they could, and eat as much, drink as much beer as they could while during the Ganachakra, and say there's a Ganachakra. But basically what we need is we need to have faith and samaya. And so if you have to have faith in this, and if you practice in it, if you do this in a way that if you do it in a way that is accorded with faith and samaya, then the Dharmakaya is fine. But if they enjoy it when you do misdeed, then they're not a Dharma protector. They're a misdeed protector. Actually, when you do unvirtuous actions such as casting sorcery and curses on others, then if you if you ask the Dharma practitioners to do that, in the end, the ruin will fall on you. And so to do the practice is in Dhamma, and in your mouth you're saying that you're making oblations to the monastery. If it's better to stop doing that entirely. And so in this way, in order to harm other sentient beings, to make orders to the Dharma practice or to encourage the activity, he wouldn't allow these to occur at all. Also, some people in his presence, and it said this is the old custom. They pretend to have a lot of pure intention and pure affection. They say, you're the Karmapa, and since you're the Karmapa, the previous Karmapas were very famous, and so you should also be like the previous Karmapas, they would say. And then they would try to do things to make his name well known. And at that time, he was one of the greatest lamas in Tibet, and so for that reason. And so they should tell him, you should act in this way, act like a big person in this way. and they would teach him how to speak speak in very pompous and impressive ways. And so you need to make they told him that he needed to make plans for the future in such a certain way. And we need to think about ways to support our own Kagyu Kama tradition. And so there are many people who had to take a partisan approach. So many people advised him to do this. Now, what Mikyö Dorje said about this later is, from the time I was a little child until very now, many people have come to me saying I should do non-dharmic things. I've had many people who've come to teach me the eight worldly dharmas, people who have come to teach me the 8 concerns. If I had done as they said, I could have put it in practice, but this human life is just a moment. It's very short. So this human life is so short. So if I did that and then practice, then there wouldn't have time to practice the Dharma. So I've forgotten about those. And I chose to do Dharma instead. So for that reason, he himself gave up non-dharmic acts. And if people would listen, he would tell them, he would encourage them to give up non-dharmic actions. Yeah, but for other people, for the evil people, who would just be indifferent towards them or equanimous towards them. So generally, their opinions. When people they talk about it, I don't think. Sometimes I think, and he said he had like and so he said that whenever people would say that people should do this, that he'd feel unbearable compassion for these people. So basically, Mikyö Dorje's character was that. When he saw other people doing misdeeds and unvirtuous actions, or people who were in suffering, when he actually saw this, or when he heard about these situations, or when he heard news about some difficult situation in another place, or that there's this sort of suffering, or that people are acting this place, and when he would merely hear about this, he would be unable to bear this. Not only could he not bear it, but it often made him sick to think about it. And the attendants in his retinue would criticize each other. And the Dharma practitioners would try to point out each other's faults. And they would criticize the great masters. And so the people who came telling about these came to tell Mikyö Dorje about this office, and when he wrote this, and sometimes people would say that, and sometimes he would put, at that time he would kind of last. If he had said this, and not okay to say this, if he admitted to say this, then they would. And he laughed, and so if he hadn't laughed at them, and told them don't do this, they would get they would have not said anything to him. They would have clammed up. And so, and he said, but at the end, he said, but in the end, later when he would feel that he would go to. So you think that there's no way to get them to look inside of it. So he looked and stuff. And so when they're looking only at the faults, so the great people such as Sanjay Nyempa Rinpoche and they go to see what they can say in front of other great beings. They can say whatever they can say, whatever they can do to proclaim these things in front of many people. And so this is really just so kind of, he realized this is a crazy way of acting, and he was just, and he could not bear this, and so he often wrote about this. So at this point, to give an example, I thought. But first of all, but first we'll have our break. And then I will continue after we reconvene. I will continue teaching. Now, as I explained before, the attendants would criticize each other, and all the practitioners would criticize each other. Not only that, they would criticize great masters, and so many people would come to him criticizing this, as he said before. So for that reason, so generally, there are 21 volumes in the collected works of Mikyö Dorje, and when you reread them, sometimes he does make refutations of the scholars from other lineages. Not only the scholars from other lineages, he also refutes Kagyu scholars. And not only them, he also refutes his own tutor, Karmapa Chunlipa, saying, this is okay, this is not, he, as well as his tutor, Tashi Wizard. So Mikyö Dorje himself Mikyö Dorje used his own intelligence to really get down to the heart of the matter. And if it was logical, then he would prove even another person as a position. And if it was not logical, then he would refute even people in his own tradition. So that is just his character. But some people didn't understand this, and they'd say, Mikyö Dorje, and they'd say, Mikyö Dorje has made this refutation of this great Lama from our religion, and so they'd say Mikyö Dorje was not right. And so it's quite possible there are people who said that. In particular, Mikyö Dorje, there are people who say that Mikyö Dorje in particular refuted the secret mantra Nyingma tradition. So many people criticized him for this, and I will explain that later. I won't explain that this evening. So we will discuss whether or not Mikyö Dorje refuted the secret mantra Nyingma tradition. Now, in his character, Mikyö Dorje, when Mikyö Dorje examined things with logic, and if it was logical, even if it was a scholar from another tradition, if he agreed with it, if it agreed with logic, he would accept it. And if it was his own tradition, if it did not, then he would refute it. But it's deep in his heart. I do not think that he lacked faith for the great masters of other traditions. For example, here's a praise for the 5 great beings of modern times who have written the great treatises about this. And so this is a praise of Sakya Pandita, and praise of Jang Kunchen. Here are praises of Buddhan Pandita. It's a praise of Lord Tsongkhapa. So one time when I went to see the Dalai Lama, or when he went to see when I went to see the Dalai Lama, we spoke about the praise written by Mikyö Dorje for Tsongkhapa. And in that praise of Tsongkhapa, Mikyö Dorje said that in usual, said that it's well known and undisputed that Mikyö Dorje, that Tsongkhapa spread the teaching of Vinaya throughout Tibet. So even though he had some did occasionally make refutations of Tsongkhapa, but in this praise, he wrote a praise of Tsongkhapa's particular praise of the Tsongkhapa. And when I said this, then the Dalai Lama said, "Oh, that's very good. That's excellent." And so in that way, he did write such a praise. But that praise, I'm not going to go through that one. And the one I'd like to share with you today. And so when I look at this, the one that gives me the most feeling, and I thought I did, so I'd like to share this with you. It's the one that gives me the most feeling.
So
this song is in the collected songs of Mikyö Dorje. When we talk about a song, it's a little different than our usual composition. We talk about a gur or a song. It's primarily it's like it's talking about one's experience and one's own feelings and one's own experience and realization. So it's that type of a work. So when you talk about the words of the Sikh, the words of songs are different than the words of our other types of works. They often have more feeling, and so this begins by saying, in the snowland of Tibet, when people merely wear the robes of Vinaya, the one called Lobdob Samdapa took the ways of Bhagavan Shakyamuni, and innumerable monks of wearing the saffron-colored banner of the robes with conduct of Shariputra filled the world. If you do not have faith in this world, who do you have faith in? The people who have been partisan maligned him. I've been caught by harmful friends and confess my wrongs done from ignorance. Please look after me in all my life. So here, Mikyö Dorje is making a supplication and a confession to Lobsang Drangpa, Tsongkhapa. So later, in later times, people didn't take much interest in the Vinaya, and the teachings of the Vinaya really described. And so Lobsang Drangpa was just like the Buddha Shakyamuni actually appearing in the world, and he upheld the teachings of the Vinaya. And when he did that, he had many students who were like Shariputra and Madhgalina, and they fulfilled the world or the land of Tibet. And so if you do not have faith in someone like Lord Tsongkhapa, then who do you have faith in? There have been times when I've been caught up by people who have I have criticized him a little bit, but this is primarily because I've been caught up by these negative friends. And to say that, and so I've come under the influence of these negative friends, and I have made these accusations without understanding. So I confess them now and say, please look after me in all of my lives. I confess my wrongs done that I did from ignorance. Now, when I was young, the Kajupas and the Gilwas had a little bit of a rivalry or a bit of a grudge. There's a long history about grudges between the Geluk and the Kagyu, particularly from the time of the fifth Karmapa onto when the armies of the Mongolian Gushi Khan attacked the Karmakajis. For that reason, we'd say that the Karmakajis had no power anymore to do anything, but inside themselves, they often disliked the Gelupas, and so it was like became like a sort of custom of doing that. So when I was young, people would always say, "Oh, the Gelupas are no good." And particularly when I was young, my quarters in the building room, there was only one room to sleep in. So there was only one living room. So I basically just one room. in the back in my there were some tankas, and one of these tankas said it had the 35 Buddhas for the confession and when I looked at and at the top of that tanka on the top. There was like Tsongkhapa was drawn on there. When I looked at that, I thought my attendant said, they said, "Oh, that's Tsongkhapa, it's no good." And there's like the fabric, and normally you roll it up, right? So it kind of covered the air. You just kind of let it go down and cover the place where Tsongkhapa was, so that you couldn't see him. However, but when I was young, I had a lot of faith in Tsongkhapa. No one ever said to me that Tsongkhapa was good, but I always felt special faith for Tsongkhapa, and I don't know the reason for this, but I have a particular faith in that. Not only that, the fifth for the fifth Dalai Lama, it's not that I have faith, but I do have some affection for him, and the main reason for this is that when I was studying poetry. I studied a poetry text by the fifth Dalai Lama, and so the fifth, and I think the fifth Dalai Lama's writing is really good, and so I do have some affection for him. But when the fifth Dalai Lama complains about the kanjis or just criticizes the kanji, then I can sort of feel like a little bit odd about that. But fundamentally, I feel affection. But so whenever they're around it, people would always speak badly about them. So for that reason, at the time of Mikyö Dorje, that must have been the same. The second reads, when the teachings are nearing their end, the Lord of this family is Vajradhara, who once again turned the wheel of Dharma, the 3 Pitakas and 4 classes of Tantra. Lord Bodong Chokle Namgyal taught inexhaustible from the Chakra through the miraculous displays, a reign of his infinite texts reigned. He started a new tradition of the true Dharma that had been unknown in the noble land and never heard by anyone in Tibet. I understood his mind was like space. If you do not have faith in this Lord, who do you have faith in? So here, what this is saying is that it's speaking about the omniscient Bodong Rinpoche. So the omniscient Bodong was a really incredible scholar. His collected works are probably the longest of any of the scholar in Tibet. He must have over 100 volumes in his collected works. And among them, it goes from how to read the alphabet all the way through Kalachakra Tantra. It has excellent teachings on all the sutra and tantra and the fields of knowledge. And so there was something he wrote in the. He had maybe set and he had like 15 secretaries, and he'd go to each of them. He'd say to one, he'd say, "You write this." He'd say, "Do you write this?" And he'd go around and circle them and say to them, and say, go to them, and the secretaries would, and so he was able to write. In a short time, he was able to write a very great amount of text, and so he had a great intelligence. And so we can talk the Bodong Kagyu, but there's the Bodong tradition. He had particular features of his view and practice. And so there's this tradition used to be actually now is probably it's like as if no longer with us, but Mikyö Dorje saying I also felt faith for them when I saw the stories of your liberation. But before, when I saw them, I hadn't heard. I didn't have faith for you at first, but now I do. So if I do not have faith in you, who will does it? So next it says, when the 5 generations of rampant tantric practitioners craved killing, blood, and flesh, at that time Avalokiteshvara took on the external conduct of the Vinaya and took the form of Vajradhara in a human body. The Jang he swept off the path of Sukit mantra. Most tantric practitioners in Tibet consider his teachings authoritative and therefore increased their virtue. May the stream of virtue filled all lands. If you do not have faith in that master, who do you have faith in? In the past, because of stains of jealousy, I felt hatred and attachment. Today I regret this and confess. Please look after me in my life. So this is about Jang Ordachen. So he's one of the 3 people we talk about the Sang Orda Cha Sum. So this is one of them, the Ngorda Chen. So at that time in Tibet, when they talk about Tibet overall, in particular, when the Kagyus would have a Gana Chakra, they would say, we're having a Gana Chakra. And they take that as an opportunity to kill animals and eat their flesh, to drink alcohol. Because of such events, the secret mantra, there were many people who practiced bad conduct through the Tantra. And so Jang Orchen said that made it very clear, if you behave in this way, that is in accord with the secret mantra. If you do not, it is not in accord with the secret mantra. And so when he said this, then many of the Tantric practitioners considers his teachings authoritative, and they stopped doing virtuous actions, eating mitch, and they've increased the flesh. So therefore, Mikyö Dorje is saying, now I feel faith in him. Now in the path, Mikyö Dorje is saying, because I felt hatred and attachment to you. But from today, I regret this and I make confessions. So please look after me in all my lives. So next, he reads, when those in the degenerate age with little knowledge cast off the teachings of the scriptures, Lhorong Shakti Gyaltsen came like the great translator Ngok. He made the teachings of the 5th instructions of philosophy shine like sun. He then dispelled the darkness of black-haired Tibetans. If you do not faith in this Lord, who do you have faith in? Please take care of me in our life. So this is a supplication to Kunken Ronjin Chempo. So the Rongjin Chempo is very important in our philosophical tradition. And so for this reason, he wrote long texts on the. So when Mikyö Dorje wrote his long texts on the sutras and tantras, Rongjin had a great influence on him. And so he's saying that his explanations of the physical tests were shone like the sun, and were extremely beneficial for the study. And for this reason, and he says, I developed faith for you. And then the end is the summary. And this is a very important summary. Now, innumerable beings upheld the precious teaching of the Buddha in the realm of the fortunate and felishes. The supreme refuge rare in the world, the jewel that Sangha covers there, so joy is equal to space. So what he's saying is that the precious teachings of the Buddha is not just Tibetan Buddhism. It can be understood as all of the Buddhist teachings of the world, but here he's speaking primarily about the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. And because of the kindness of the masters of all lineage, they are spreading and flourishing. Likewise, the supreme, like the sublime community, or the great field for merit, is the refuge, is the jewel of the Sangha. And because of the kindness of the great masters, it is also covering the earth. And so, Mikyö Dorje's mind is filled with great joy. It says, instead of being envious of other Dharma lineages flourish in the path, there is no way but to be caught up by the horse of regret. Now, I Mikyö Dorje, is it? When people said that other lineages were flourishing, I sometimes felt a bit of envy, but now I feel great. I feel such great regret as even a horse could not carry it. And so I feel great into this. I feel a great feeling for them. And because I have such a great feeling for them, I feel such great regret that I dare be like this, such as that I could not dare to be like this, as unchild sorry confess. Though I feel intense regret now, until my awareness is clear in an isolated place, and I am filled with the light of devotion for the undisputed Karmapa Siddha, such as Sanjay Nyingpa, I will supplicate fervently. I understand this is authentic blessing. And so one of the things I'm feeling such great regret, thinking like, how could I have done this in the past, and having like this unbearable pain or unbearable feeling. It's like he had no choice but to make his confession. There was no way he could not confess. And the reason for feeling these, for such intense regret, is that when he was in a isolated place, and because his body and mind were in an isolated place, his eyes became clear, and the awareness became clear, and the mind became clear, and he was filled with not just devotion, but also devotions for the undisputed Kagyu Mahasiddhas, such as Sanjay Nyingpa. And so for this strong regret to occur is his own authentic blessing, So if you think you follow me, do not make Dharma lineages into me and you, or mine and yours. It is fine for the Buddha's teaching to spread. Do not think with your bias that your own funds may worry about the teachings of all lineages burn intolerably as the wind in the heart. If you think you're following me, if you think you're going to be my student, if there's someone who's saying that, you shouldn't make debates in between the Dharma lineage saying me and you. If anything is the teaching of the Buddha, it's great if it's spread. It doesn't necessarily. If you say that it absolutely has to be our side that flourishes, theirs that doesn't, then that's not okay. So we should always be worrying about what can we do to help all the teachings of all lineages burn. And so this should come should be something that we should always a worry that should always burn intolerably in our heart. So that's what it should be like, he says. And so for that reason, so this is a really important point. We need to have a wider perspective, a broader perspective. If the teachings of the Buddha disappear, then there's no way for there to be Tibetan Buddhism. You wouldn't even say Buddhism. If you can't say Tibetan Buddhism, then you can't say Kagyupa. And so for that reason. So the teaching of the Buddha overall, though the framework is important that the entire framework of the Buddha's teachings remains without destroying. Now, if we divide the Buddha's teachings into factions and groups, then in the end, then we see others' teachings as a fault. They see ours as a fault. So we see them, they see us, and in the end, there's nowhere that you can identify as the Buddha's teaching. That's a great danger. And so for that reason, Mikyö Dorje himself So from our perspective, Mikyö Dorje is we see him as someone who has a great Lama with wisdom, love, and power. But here he's saying that he's an ordinary person. I felt jealousy in the past, he said. I felt anger in the past. But now I feel regret. Otherwise, most of our Tibetan Lamas, we look at their numbers, there are very few who say in their autobiographies, "Oh, I felt afflictions before. I felt a desire. I felt hatred. I felt envy. Also, now I regret that. I confess." But Mikyö Dorje is a very forthright in character. So the way I was doing things before was not good. I regret. So from now on, so I'm going to change myself, and I'm no longer going to do that. And so he would speak clearly and speak very forthrightly. And so it's easy for us to follow him. Otherwise, if we don't really know what the Guru's intent is, then sometimes we have the difficulty if we don't really know how we're supposed to follow that Lama. But since Mikyö Dorje made it very clear, then there's this question of whether we follow, engage or not is something that's in our hands. If we are unable to follow Mikyö Dorje, it's our fault. It's not something. It's not Mikyö Dorje's fault. So this is something we need to keep in mind. So in brief, Mikyö Dorje, as I explained before, was always thinking about sentient beings in general and the overall Buddha teachings, and he always worried about that. Because of that, he became very thin. He didn't sleep well, and his body became very weak. So this is recorded in the stories. So these days, when we look at the paintings of Mikyö Dorje, then and so forth, and he's kind of he's like that. He's very thin. His cheeks are kind of hollow. He's so thin that his cheeks got very hollow. So in brief, all of the attendants and his retinue and people from all around it would advise him to say that he needed to do misdeeds and should do various things. And many people said that, but he wouldn't actually criticize them or disregard them. But he would try to do what he could indirectly to give up, to turn away from non-dharmic action. So what he said himself, Mikyö Dorje said himself was, now, I do not have anything else in my life to feel self-important or conceited about, something that I think I did this, something that I can feel that I can say is good, or something that I good. There's nothing that I can feel conceited about like that. But in this degenerate time, I've had to. There are a lot of people who pretend to be monastics, but in terms of their practice, their conduct is even worse than ordinary liberals. They aren't even tainted by a whiff of the Dharma, and they enjoy the offerings to the three jewels without any restraint or caution. And I had to spend a lot of time with them. I had to live with them, and that did happen. But I didn't take up their behavior. No, that I just tried to. Then it's always saying, oh, "You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that." I didn't always. I didn't cut off their ties of up. Instead, I remained in an equanimous state and was able, without any thought of near or far, and I was able to spend all day and night. It's never apart from enjoying the true Dharma. And I think this is kind of a good, I think it's somewhat of a quality, one of the best things I've done. And it's just as I said, it even put that into practice. And other people saw him, and how we know this, for one time, there was a Lama named Lama Shabchenpa, and he came to Mikyö Dorje. And he came to Mikyö Dorje, and what he said is, if I were in your position, if I took your place, it would be easy for me to gather 5,000 bhikshus who wore the outer robes. So this is what he said, and when he said that, the reply that Mikyö Dorje gave was, if you were in my position, you wouldn't last even a day. You look at it and you think it's easy, but it's not. Everyone in my retinue have different ideas, different thoughts. No, they have different ideas. And staying in the midst of so many people, what you need to be able to stay in the middle of a sort of group, so many people, is you need to be able to remain within a state of equanimity and to see all the crucial points of samsara and nirvana, to see all the main points of Dharma. Otherwise, if you don't have that, then there's no way you could stay in my position. And this is what he said. And so, So he was able to really firm in his own convictions. And when it came down to the main points of the world and Dharma, he was actually able to know exactly what it was and give direction on that. From one perspective, Mikyö Dorje himself, even when other people did non-dharmic things or behaved badly, Mikyö Dorje did not immediately criticize them, or didn't automatically criticize them. He may not have done it, but from perspective, he would work even harder for their sake. And so it seems that he had that way of acting, and the way we know that, because no matter, and likewise, no matter when he was studying, he never let himself get lazy or come into the influence of laziness while he was studying the great texts. And he was actually really very careful about how he did all his work. What Mikyö Dorje said is, he says, I have thoughts of the 8 worldly consumptions, when they occur, I think it did that time. You thought of the worldly thought from the beginning of samsara. You bad thoughts, you've been coming, and so you're going to come. So if you come, fine. If you're going to come, come. But I'm not going to take care of you. And when he thought about it, by the power of that, it was really beneficial. Likewise, Mikyö Dorje himself, when he went to bed at night, as before he did that evening, he would kind of pick up his mala and kind of count how many bad thoughts and count them, count how many good thoughts, and at the end, and even the words that he spoke, he'd count those. If they were good, then he was happy about them. He'd delight in them. He'd dedicate it for the sanctity of others. And if there's anything unvirtuous, he'd confess it and make aspirations and prayers that it never happen again. And so he was something who was really assiduous in the way that he worked. He was always very assiduous in the things that he did. And so Mikyö Dorje, there are many people around Mikyö Dorje, and he didn't speak to them directly, no matter what they did. And he didn't criticize them or scold them. And he didn't always say that they should do. And so many people, and because he wasn't scolding them all the time, many people did come to him. So many people said to him, so Mikyö Dorje keeps a lot of people aren't really low people, are not really monastics, and if they're always people, maybe it'd be better to take the Geshe Rabjangpas who really know philosophy well. Or maybe we should just be surrounded by great meditators. And if we made him stay in that sort of environment, then he would get more offerings, and people would have more influence in terms of the Dharma. And so many people thought that. And so in addition, there's the Lama Shabjempa who I mentioned earlier, right? So Lama Shabjempa, when he came to Mikyö Dorje, he said to Mikyö Dorje, among all the incarnations of the Karmapas, you're the one who's done the worst, for the most harm to the Kagyu teachings. None has done more harm than you. You haven't worked out as Karma. If I were to take your place, I would gather out the 500,000. It would only take a minute to gather 5,000 pictures. When I was in Kan, there are people. I had 500 monks who wore the Dharma robes and didn't drink. Now look at the people. All these people who are drinking beer. They're doing all these things, right? And so he said this. And when he said that, then Mikyö Dorje, what Mikyö Dorje said was, he didn't say anything else. He said, he didn't say anything else, but I prostrate to those who are able to gather a retinue of people who have the 3 robes of the 3 trainings, and who are able to gather as many Sangha people as many Tsongkhapa. And so later someone said, Mikyö Dorje, that Lama Shep Jempa is not a real spiritual teacher. He's not someone who actually sees the teacher. And so there's, as I said, like in the story of the so it's like in the story about the time when the Buddha was taken to birth as a Buddha. So many people at that time thought they had to kill him, and then skin him. And when they thought they should kill the lion, but the lion was very killed, so they couldn't come close enough to him. But when they looked at it, the lion, but he never did anything to harm those who wore the Dharma robes, the actual. And so they went, and so they put on monastic robes, and they were able to get close enough to the lion that they were able to harm him. And so when the clothes they wore is the monastic robes, but at the inside, they don't have the qualities of all the qualities of Buddhism. And so that's the type of Lama that Lama Shep Jempa likes, he said. Mikyö Dorje himself Mikyö Dorje would never say that I'm going to sit and say I'm in resting equipoise, do not disturb me. I'm sitting in meditation, don't disturb me. Or he would never say, the Karmapa is meditation, so do not allow audiences for a few hours. And when he was memorizing texts for every day, he would be reading, right? He would always be making sasa offerings and torma offerings, whatever, and he would always do meditation every day. And he would also hold his breath into the yogic exercise, and he had very good practice of that. And he had authentic practice, a practice like a Vajra master. And so he never took any attention and tried to make it look like he was doing that. So mainly what he did is to teach the Dharma, give teachings, explain philosophy to them. And that is where he primarily put his efforts. So many people, what they said to him, so many people at that time said, oh, Mikyö Dorje is really lazy because it would be good for him to recite some mandala rituals of some deity. Then it would be good. If you were able to recite even do the full approach practice of a deity, then he would be able to. But he wouldn't do that. And because he's not doing the practice and not giving empowerments, he's really harming the teachings, they would say. And at one time, there's a Lama called Chila. And this Lama came to Mikyö Dorje and he said to Mikyö Dorje, when he said, Mikyö Dorje, I said, who's more diligent, you, the student or the master? Lama Chila said, I'm much more diligent because so if I say the Ashta mantras or Vajra mantras that are recited in a single day mantra, if you were to say that many, the Karmapa, your mouth would catch on fire. Basically saying you wouldn't say it. If you were to say it, then your mouth would catch on fire. Then Mikyö Dorje then I said, you're the way of taking it. I said, you're less diligent because I can't. And so because I don't have made a joke to him saying, you were less diligent, you're more diligent because I'm so diligent that I never do any sessions in my whole life. You could not do that. So, but when he has to practice, but when he would do the practice, such as doing generosity or practicing discipline or patience and so forth, he wouldn't do it in a way so that other people say, I'm being diligent, I'm practicing patience, I'm giving my discipline. He didn't like doing it in ways that other people would see it. Still, if people say that he hadn't memorized the mandala text, then Mikyö Dorje would tell them, they'd tell them exactly of the appearance of all the details of the deity and the visualizations. So just because he didn't remember the words doesn't mean that you can't say that he hadn't retained in his mind the practices of the deities. And we say that he hadn't recited the mantras of any of the minor deities because he had teaching so many instructions, so that in order to there are many people because there are many when he taught the practice, there are many people who had without any obstacle achieved signs of accomplishment through them. And so because of this, the empowerments that he gave, when you say that the empowerments that he gave were not in accord with the Dharma, then that is not necessarily so. So some people pretended that they knew, who pretended that they knew well, and so they'd say that this is how it is, this is that, and so that things should be necessarily one or the other is not good, is what he said. So in any case, Mikyö Dorje went through many difficulties in his life, and particularly when he was young, as I mentioned before. Gyaltsap Tashi passed away. Situ Tashi passed away. He was not allowed to meet the lamas who he wanted to meet, and for that reason, and so he was left all alone, and he had very great difficulties about this. So if people like us, it would be difficult for us to bear with such suffering and such difficulties as he did. But he had a very high vision, and because of his efforts, so now when we say Karmapa Mikyö Dorje, among all of the different incarnations of the Karmapa, he is like one of the greatest and one who really stands out. And it's not like when you talk about it, it's not something who just is like self-liberation from that, but self-liberated, spontaneous like that. It's not like that. It is the result of the many difficulties that he went through. And this is really important for us to understand. Like for myself, I had many difficulties in my life. And if we talk about them in brief, when I was in Tibet, until I was 7, I was in my homeland. And I think these are the happiest days of my life because I had no responsibility, and I was with my parents. My home was a really beautiful place. So when you think about it internally and externally, the happiest time of my life was the time up to the age of 7. And then from the age of 7, they said that I was recognized as being the Karmapa. They said I'm the Karmapa. And some people think that when you say the Karmapa, that becoming the Karmapa, from perspective, it's a very high position. And you get all the food and clothing that you want. This is what people think.
된다 가리 예비냐 대다 탐시 애네 샤비 공거티 주기 마까나버좀 유rum로래 삼상하고
And people
되게
think that as soon as he tells people to do something what they want to do, the attendants will immediately do it. It's really not like that, actually. Before I arrived at Super Monastery, it was decided as a Karmapa. Before it had been decided as a Karmapa, but before I was brought to Tsurpu, there was the steward or Changze, and he said to another person, several people said to them this. What he said was, "It's a Karmapa or not, whoever he is, it doesn't matter. So I'm not going to get him with it. I'm not going to let it get above my neck." So I said, so as he said, in the practice, he did it that way when I was young. When someone would make an offering, the offerings are given to the Karmapa. It's given because of the title Karmapa, right? So they offered it, and people would look and they say that I'd gotten it. They think that I would then take care of it. But what happened? But they offered it, but the person who took it was someone who's behind me. For example, there are some people I know from Taiwan, and they knew me. What they would say was, when I had not taught them, they would be sitting in front of me. They would secretly, they would put an envelope underneath my carpet. This is for you. This is to give to your parents, right? And they put the envelope under my bed. The reason was that if they understood that no matter how much offerings, no matter how much money, that the steward was going to take it all. They understood that. So they did it secretly. They would give to me secretly. They would give it, but sometimes it didn't work out, and he'd learn about them and take them. And because after I was done, and I had to go to the puja. We go to the puja. The stewards would go looking to see what was underneath the table, what was underneath the carpet. They'd pull the tortoise away and see if anything's put in between. So what they'd say to me is, we're taking them down to make sure that to see whether there's any poison on them. And so that's why we take them down. And after that, but once they took them down, they'd never bring them back. One time, Power Rinpoche, they asked me, please recognize the reincarnation of Power Rinpoche. There was a Lama who was the director of Nenana Monastery. He gave me a golden Buddha with a Serdin necklace. It was a statue Buddha that's of that size, and he gave it to me. So he gave it to me. So when the Lama came back, and he came back and said, the Changze steward is wearing that statue I gave to you yesterday. And then even more than that, the steward said, hey, look at this. Isn't it beautiful? Does it look good? When he said that, he said inside him fire was when he said, I thought to myself, I offered to the Karmapa, why are you wearing it? But I couldn't say anything, he said. And not only that, so the custom had before then had been so that when the parents had raised me from being a child, and then at the point when I was taken up, then when I was taken from, then the tradition was so that the Tripuladang would build them a house or something. But forget about even building a house. One day, when the Tsupa monastery they would come, they wouldn't allow them to come even more than once a day. The Tsupa monastery would they would think, and they didn't even dare come because they thought that the steward and the old lamas would be annoyed when they were being friends from Kam and acquaintance. They would make things. Oh, they're bringing all sorts of people. I have many sisters, but among them, there's one of the two. But a couple of them were in retreat at Serp when they would come to see me. And they said, "You're not allowed to meet them. With your father and mother, it's nothing. You're not allowed to eat your mother, who doesn't." So many different situations. So there are many different problems. In the end, finally, my father and mother are very modest, and they didn't have any pride of thinking, "Oh, I'm the Karmapa's parents." But they came to the end. They just got to the end of their ropes, and my father and my father's friend came to me, and they said, "You have to speak to the Supalata, otherwise you can't just continue on like this." And so my father went to speak to the Supalata, and that friend who came to this, he was actually very forthright. He said, "The Supalata." He said, if we weren't right in front of the Karmapa, I'd just take care of them right away. So my father went down, he spoke to the Supalata. I said, we're the parents. It's not saying we need a lot of great offerings. It's not like we need a lot of presents. We just like to be able to see our child when we want to. And like it be so that his siblings can meet him. If we don't like that, then I'm going to take my son with me and go. And then they got a little bit afraid. And so they got scared and they said, and so when the children were going, they gave them all sorts of new clothes and everything and sent it down. And so there are many situations like that. So there are those situations, but from at the time I was young. So at that time I was 7 years old, right? So I was kind of under control. So I didn't dare say anything to him. But one time, what happened? For some reason, I did say a couple of things. And the son got really, and he took my two hands and he grabbed my two hands with it really strong. It's really something that you're so little, but you're taking that and he took and squeezed them really hard. And I started to cry. So that's when I was in Tibet. And then when I got to India, I was many, even worse than that. So I'm not going to speak about them for the moment. So because when people think the Karmapa, it must be a really good life. So it has a lot of freedom. And everyone's going to listen to and do what he says. But it's not like that. It's not even like that now. It wasn't like that in the past either. In particular, during the time of Mikyö Dorje, when he was young, first was the dispute over whether he was the Karmapa or not. And the people who had supported the Western tulku often tried to do what they can to get around the Karmapa. And that's sort of not only do you have to live in that environment, but he also had to do the activity of a Karmapa, and that was not at all easy. Now, when we read his text, it seems like really easy. But if you put yourself in that situation. Think about it. It's not easy, is it? And so for that reason, what we need to think is, Mikyö Dorje is probably an emanation of a Buddha and a Bodhisattva. He probably had knowledge and understanding, but we can't really know that. But in terms of a human being, he had a lot of difficulties. But what did he do for the benefit of teachings and beings? And that's why we should think of him so important. We need to identify that really clearly, I think. If we are able to do that, then only at that point will we ourselves and be able to get some real confidence in this lifetime, and feel some confidence that we can do something on the behalf of the teachings and beings. So I don't have a lot more to say. Now we will recite the closing prayers.